Welcome back to the Introduction to Grounded Connections and Reclaiming Our Voices. Before we dive into songs and our embodied experience of songs, we want to give you some historical information and context for why we're using songs. Not only do songs help us by soothing our vagus nerve, increasing our connection with one another, we're also using song because of its specific relationship and role in Irish history and Irish culture. So we're going to have Brian give a little bit of a background on the role of song in Irish culture before contact and invasion by the British, throughout the process of colonization of Ireland, and then also how our relationship with songs changed as we arrived in North America and as we were incorporated into North American capitalism. So Brian brings to us a wealth of knowledge. He's a master's in post-colonial studies and Irish history and an MA in Irish song and dance. So we're excited for him to share this history with us so that we can have an understanding of the context in which we're engaging with song and use the parallels between the British systems of settler colonialism in Ireland and the similar systems that were imposed in both Canada and the United States, or so-called Canada and United States. So I hope you enjoy his sharing, and we're looking forward to using this information to help us figure out who we are now and engage with song in a way that helps us build our capacity for speaking truth, hearing truth, and being brave.
Hi, Jis Morgui Misha Brian Hart, the Grounded Connections. I'm Brian Hart with Grounded Connections, and I'd like to talk with you a little bit about reclaiming our voices and to lay some historical groundwork or context for the use of traditional song within our experiment. And this kind of harkens back quite a bit to the 12th century in Ireland and follows a system of oppression that was targeted at undermining the independence of the Irish people and their self-determination. So when England invaded Ireland in the 12th century, it attempted to impose English common law on the Irish people, whom they considered to be kind of the antithesis of English culture, both barbaric and uncivilized. The Irish resisted vigorously, and Brehon law continued to remain the integral structure that linked together the various loosely affiliated and decentralized tribes of the island of Ireland. By the 16th century, though, the progeny of the first English colonizers, introduced 400 years previously, had adopted the language, cultural, legal, and inheritance practices of the Gaelic people, illustrating the failed attempt of civilizing the Irish through discourse and coercion. It was in the 16th century, under the reigns of Henry VIII, who had created his own state-sanctioned religion, Anglicanism, and his daughter Elizabeth I, who so despised Irish and the harpers that she called for all to be hung where found and their instruments destroyed. But it was at that time that England became fully convinced of the superiority of its own common law system, and equally convinced that violence was the only way forward in civilizing the Irish people. And this resulted in England's implementation of penal laws. Now, these laws were conceived to undermine Irish culture by disenfranchising native Irish Catholics and early Scots Presbyterian settlers of land ownership, material wealth, recourse and representation through government, access to education, religious freedom, etc., etc. And this did much to destabilize Ireland over the expanse of nearly 300 years, undermining many Gaelic traditions as a result, including arts patronage. Now, this led to the collapse of formalized poetry and music upheld by the bardic schools and the Gaelic aristocracy, leading to a synthesis of what is understood to be traditional Irish music today. As a result of the era of penal laws, though, Ireland also incrementally, and then rather dramatically due to the famine of the mid-19th century, became English-speaking. And the corrosive nature of these penal laws, which had successfully impoverished the vast majority of native Irish, compounded with the omissive actions during a humanitarian crisis like the famine by a government that insisted on its own superiority resulted in the death of over 1 million Irish people and the forced expulsion through outmigration of nearly twice as many. The ramifications of this nearly put an end to many Irish cultural practices, music among them, as a pervasive silence stemmed from trauma fell over the island of Ireland at the close of the famine in the 1850s. Were it not for political rage resulting from the famine, which led to eventual independence in the early 20th century, England might have finally succeeded in civilizing the Irish 800 years after its first attempt. However, the push for an achievement of independence from the British monarchy saw a fluorescence of cultural practices, both old and new, and many brought back from the brink, but many completely lost as well. Thankfully, singing persisted and has persisted and was used consistently as a tool for rebellion. And for this reason, we'll be utilizing traditional song to explore ourselves and our bodies through the Reclaiming Our Voices experiment. We hope you'll join us. Gora Mila Magi, Slán.